Jessica Martinez checked her appearance in the small mirror near the aircraft galley, hair neat in its regulation bun, uniform pressed, delta wings pin properly positioned. She'd been a flight attendant for 11 years and took pride in maintaining professional standards, even on the third flight of a long day. Flight 28047 from Orlando to Seattle was routine, a full Boeing 737 with 162 passengers, mostly families returning from Disney World vacations and business travelers. Jessica and her crew of 4 flight attendants were managing the typical chaos of boarding, stowing luggage, helping passengers find seats, answering questions about Wi-Fi and meal service. As passengers filed past, Jessica observed them with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen thousands of travelers, families with exhausted children still wearing Mickey Mouse ears, business people in suits typing on laptops, couples holding hands, solo travelers with headphones already in place. Nothing unusual. Then Jessica noticed them, a middle-aged man and a young girl, maybe 7 years old, making their way down the aisle. The man was in his early 50s, average build, wearing business casual clothes, khakis and a polo shirt. The girl was small for her age, blonde, wearing jeans and a pink jacket. They were seated in row 18, middle seats. Something about them caught Jessica's attention, though she couldn't immediately identify what felt off. The man's hand was on the girl's shoulder, not unusual for a father with a child, but the girl's body language was stiff, uncomfortable. She wasn't chatting excitedly like the other children returning from Disney World. She looked subdued, scared even. Jessica filed the observation away and continued with boarding procedures. Sometimes children were just tired or anxious about flying. It didn't necessarily mean anything was wrong, but as she moved through the cabin doing her pre-flight safety check, Jessica found her eyes drawn back to row 18. The man was typing on his phone. The girl was staring straight ahead, her small hands gripping the armrests tightly. They weren't talking to each other, no interaction at all. Again, that could be normal. Not every parent chatted constantly with their child on flights, but combined with the girl's body language and apparent fear, it felt wrong. Jessica approached row 18 with her professional smile. "Good afternoon. Just checking that your seat belts are fastened and your seats and tray tables are in the upright position." The man looked up and smiled. "All set, thanks." Jessica glanced at the girl. "Hi there, sweetie. Excited to go home?" The girl didn't respond, just stared at Jessica with wide, frightened eyes. "She's just tired," the man said quickly. "Long day at the parks. She's not much of a talker anyway." "Of course," Jessica said, maintaining her smile while her instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Let me know if you need anything during the flight." As Jessica walked away, she made a mental note of the seat numbers, 18D and 18E. She decided to pay closer attention to them during the flight. The flight took off on schedule. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign was turned off, Jessica and her fellow flight attendants began beverage service. Jessica deliberately took the cart for the section that included row 18. When she reached them, Jessica smiled at the girl. "What would you like to drink, honey? We have apple juice, orange juice, ginger ale, water." The girl looked at the man as if seeking permission before speaking. He nodded slightly. "Apple juice, please," the girl said quietly, her voice barely audible. "Great choice. And for your dad." The instant Jessica said "your dad," the girl's eyes widened and she opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it quickly. But Jessica had seen the reaction, a flash of confusion or fear when Jessica referred to the man as her father. The man interjected quickly, "I'll have a coffee, black." As Jessica poured the drinks, she tried another approach. "Did you guys have fun at Disney World? What was your favorite ride?" The girl remained silent. The man answered, "She loved It's a Small World." "Right, Emma." Emma. So that was the girl's name. But Emma didn't respond to her name being called, didn't confirm or deny about the ride, just accepted the juice with trembling hands. "Emma's really shy," the man added with a forced chuckle. "Especially with strangers. She barely talks to anyone but family." Jessica nodded and moved on with the beverage cart, but her concern was intensifying. The girl's behavior, the man's quick interventions, the lack of natural interaction between them, everything felt wrong. After beverage service, Jessica returned to the galley where her colleague, flight attendant Michael Torres, was organizing snack boxes. "Michael, I need a second opinion on something," Jessica said quietly. "Row 18, seats D and E. Middle-aged guy with a young girl, maybe 7. Something feels off about them." Michael discreetly looked toward row 18. "Off how?" The girl seems scared. She's not talking, not interacting with him naturally. When I called him her dad, she looked confused or frightened, and he's very controlling, answering for her, explaining away her behavior, not letting her speak for herself. Could just be a shy kid with a quiet father, Michael suggested. Maybe, but my gut says something's wrong. Can you observe them too? See if you get the same feeling. Sure, I'll do a walkthrough and check on them. While Michael observed from a distance, Jessica decided to approach row 18 again, this time with snack boxes to offer. She wanted another opportunity to interact with the girl and see her reactions. "Hi again," Jessica said cheerfully, stopping at their row. "Would you like some snacks? We have pretzels, cookies and crackers." "We're fine, thank you," the man said immediately, but Emma looked longingly at the snack boxes. She was clearly hungry, but afraid to ask. "Are you sure, sweetie?" Jessica addressed Emma directly. "The cookies are really good." Emma glanced at the man, silently asking permission. He sighed as if annoyed. "Fine, she can have cookies." Jessica handed Emma a package of cookies. As she did, Jessica noticed bruises on Emma's wrist that had been partially hidden by her jacket sleeve. Fresh bruises, dark purple, in a pattern that looked like finger marks, as if someone had grabbed her arm forcefully. Jessica's blood ran cold, but she kept her expression neutral. "There you go, honey. Enjoy." As Jessica turned to leave, Emma suddenly grabbed her hand. Jessica looked down at the small hand clutching hers, then at Emma's face. The girl was staring at Jessica with desperate, pleading eyes. "Thank you," Emma whispered. Then, even quieter, so quiet Jessica almost missed it. "That's not my dad." The man immediately grabbed Emma's arm, the same arm with the bruises, and pulled her hand away from Jessica's. "Emma, don't bother the flight attendant." His voice was friendly, but his grip on Emma's arm was tight enough that Emma winced. Jessica's training kicked in. She smiled as if nothing was wrong. "No bother at all. She's very sweet. Let me know if you need anything else." Jessica walked calmly back to the galley, her heart pounding. Once out of sight of row 18, she grabbed Michael's arm. She said, "That's not my dad. The girl just told me that's not her father, and I saw bruises on her wrist, finger marks like someone grabbed her hard. We have a situation." Michael's expression turned serious. "What do you want to do?" "I need to alert the captain. We might have a child abduction in progress." Flight attendants are trained in recognizing and responding to potential human trafficking and child abduction situations. Jessica had taken the required training, but this was the first time she'd encountered a real situation. Jessica went to the cockpit and used the intercom to speak privately with Captain David Reynolds. "Captain, this is Jessica. I have a situation I need to report. I believe we may have a child abduction victim on board. Row 18, seats D and E. Stand by," Captain Reynolds said. Within a minute, he'd put the flight on autopilot and stepped out of the cockpit to speak with Jessica privately. Jessica explained everything she'd observed. The girl's frightened demeanor, the lack of natural interaction between her and the man's controlling behavior, the girl's whispered statement that he wasn't her father, and the bruises on her wrist. Captain Reynolds' expression was grim. "That's enough red flags to warrant investigation. I'm going to contact Seattle Ground Security and FBI. They'll meet the aircraft when we land. In the meantime, we need to keep this situation calm and ensure the girl's safety without alerting the man that we're suspicious." "Understood," Jessica said. "Continue monitoring them," Captain Reynolds instructed. "Don't do anything that would make the man aware we're concerned. We don't want him to panic or harm the child. We'll handle this on the ground with law enforcement support." Jessica nodded and returned to her duties, but her attention remained focused on row 18. Over the next 2 hours of the flight, she observed the man and Emma carefully. The man never let Emma out of his sight. When Emma asked to use the restroom, he went with her, standing outside the lavatory door. He maintained physical contact with her constantly, hand on her arm, shoulder or knee. Emma remained quiet, withdrawn and frightened throughout the flight. Jessica coordinated with the other flight attendants to ensure someone was always near row 18, observing without being obvious about it. They all agreed something was very wrong with the situation. As the flight began its descent into Seattle, Captain Reynolds made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Jessica watched the man's reaction carefully. He showed no signs of concern or awareness that anything was unusual. He was confident, relaxed, clearly believing his journey with Emma would continue without incident. But Jessica knew what he didn't. FBI agents and airport security were waiting at the gate to intercept them. As Flight 28047 taxied to the gate at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, FBI Special Agent David Foster and his team positioned themselves just outside the jetway. They'd been briefed by Captain Reynolds during the flight about the suspected child abduction situation. We have a middle-aged male traveling with a young girl who told flight attendants, "That's not my dad." Agent Foster briefed his team. The flight attendant observed frightened behavior, controlling actions by the male, bruises on the child's wrist, and lack of natural interaction between them. We're treating this as a potential abduction until we confirm otherwise. The plan was carefully coordinated. Andrets would board the aircraft before passengers were allowed to deplane. They would approach the man and girl calmly, asking them to remain seated while other passengers exited. Once the plane was mostly empty, they would separate the man and girl for individual interviews. Throughout, the priority was the child's safety and not causing panic among other passengers. "Remember, we don't know the full situation yet," Agent Foster reminded his team. "This could be a legitimate father-daughter relationship where the child is just scared of flying or upset about something. Or this could be a kidnapping. We need to stay calm, professional, and prioritize the child's safety above all else." As soon as the aircraft door opened and the jetway connected, Agent Foster and 2 other agents boarded. Jessica Martinez, who'd been waiting near the exit, immediately approached them. "I'm Jessica Martinez, the flight attendant who reported the situation. They're in row 18, seats D and E. The man's name we don't have. He didn't introduce himself. The girl's name is Emma. She's terrified. Please be careful." "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. We'll take it from here. Please help keep the other passengers calm while we handle this." Agent Foster walked down the aisle toward row 18. The man and Emma were still seated, with the man's hand firmly on Emma's shoulder. "Excuse me, sir," Agent Foster said, displaying his FBI credentials. "I'm Special Agent David Foster with the FBI. I need you and the young lady to remain seated for a moment while other passengers deplane. We have some questions for you." The man's friendly expression faltered for just a second, a flash of panic in his eyes before he recovered and smiled. "Is there a problem, Agent? We have a connecting flight to catch. This will just take a few minutes. Please remain seated." The man looked like he was calculating his options. Could he run? Could he fight? Could he talk his way out of this? Agent Foster positioned himself to block the aisle while his partner stood at the other end of the row, cutting off escape routes. "Sir, I need you to remain calm and seated," Foster said firmly. "We just need to ask some questions. If there's no issue, you'll be on your way shortly." As other passengers filed past, several glanced curiously at the agents, but most were too focused on deplaning to pay much attention. Within 10 minutes, the aircraft was largely empty except for the crew, agents and the man and Emma. "Sir, what's your name?" Agent Foster asked. "Robert Mitchell, and this is my daughter Emma. Is there a problem? Can you provide identification, please?" Robert pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. "Robert Mitchell, age 52, address in Phoenix, Arizona." Agent Foster's partner ran the name through databases on a tablet. "And do you have identification for Emma? Birth certificate, passport, any documentation showing she's your daughter?" Robert hesitated. "I didn't bring her birth certificate on vacation. Who travels with their child's birth certificate? I have custody papers at home, but not with me." That was a red flag. Most parents traveling with children had some form of identification for the child, especially for air travel. "Where are you traveling from and where are you headed?" Foster asked. "We were in Orlando for vacation, Disney World. Now we're flying home to Phoenix. We have a connecting flight in an hour. Emma, can you talk to me for a minute?" Agent Foster knelt down to Emma's eye level, speaking gently. "Your name is Emma." Emma looked at Robert, clearly scared. He gave her a tight smile. "It's okay, Emma. Answer the agent's questions." Emma nodded slightly but didn't speak. "Emma, is this man your father?" Foster asked directly. He... Emma's voice was barely a whisper. She looked terrified. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe. You can tell me the truth. Is this man your daddy?" Tears started rolling down Emma's face. She shook her head very slightly. "No." Robert immediately interjected. "She's confused. She calls me Robert sometimes instead of Dad. Kids are weird about names. Right, Emma? Tell them I'm your dad." But Emma was crying now, and she reached toward Agent Foster. "Please help me. He took me. I want my mommy. I want to go home." Robert stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's my daughter. She's just confused and tired from travel. I don't have to answer these questions." "Sir, sit down," Agent Foster commanded. "You're not leaving until we sort this out. Emma just stated you're not her father and that you took her. That's an extremely serious allegation." Robert's facade was crumbling. "She's confused. She has attachment issues, tells lies for attention. Her mother and I have custody arrangements, and what's Emma's full name?" Foster interrupted. "Emma Mitchell. Emma Rose Mitchell. And her mother's name?" Robert hesitated again. Sarah Mitchell. My ex-wife." What's Sarah's phone number? I don't have it memorized. It's in my phone. These hesitations and vague answers weren't consistent with a father talking about his own child and ex-wife. Agent Foster made a decision. Mr. Mitchell, I'm detaining you for questioning regarding possible child abduction. You have the right to remain silent. As Foster read Miranda rights, another agent gently took Emma's hand. Emma, sweetheart, you're safe now. This man can't hurt you. We're going to take you somewhere safe and call your mummy. Can you tell me your mummy's name? Mummy's name is Amy. Amy Wilson, Emma said through tears. Amy Wilson, not Sarah Mitchell. Robert had given the wrong name for Emma's mother because he wasn't her father and didn't actually know her mother's name. And where do you live, Emma? What city? Orlando. We live in Orlando, on Magnolia Street, with Mummy and my brother Ethan. Orlando, not Phoenix. Emma lived in Orlando, where the flight had originated, not Phoenix, where Robert claimed they were headed home. The situation was now clear. Robert Mitchell had abducted Emma in Orlando and was attempting to transport her out of state on this flight. If Jessica Martinez hadn't noticed Emma's distress and Emma hadn't whispered, "That's not my dad," Robert would have succeeded in taking Emma away from her home and family. While Robert Mitchell was taken into FBI custody for interrogation, Emma was brought to a child-friendly interview room at the airport, where trained child forensic interviewer Dr. Lisa Park spoke with her gently to understand what had happened. "Emma, you're very brave," Dr. Park said softly. "You're safe now. The man who took you can't hurt you anymore. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up on that airplane with that man?" Through tears and halting words, Emma told her story. Emma Wilson, age 7, lived in Orlando with her mother Amy Wilson, age 32, and her younger brother Ethan, age 4. Emma's father had passed away 2 years ago in a car accident, leaving Amy to raise the children alone. Yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, Emma had been playing in the front yard of their house on Magnolia Street in Orlando. Amy was inside making dinner, checking on the kids through the window every few minutes. "A man came up to me," Emma said. "He said he was a friend of Mummy's. He said Mummy was sick and asked him to pick me up and take me to see her at the hospital. He said we needed to hurry." Classic predator tactic, creating urgency and using the mother as a lure to get the child to comply. "I was scared about Mummy being sick," Emma continued. "The man seemed nice. He said we had to go right away, so I got in his car. Did you tell your mummy you were leaving?" Emma shook her head, crying harder. "I should have, but the man said we had to hurry, and there wasn't time. I thought Mummy needed me." Robert Mitchell had driven Emma to a motel on the outskirts of Orlando. He kept her there overnight, telling her they'd go see her mother in the morning. But there was no mother in a hospital. It was all lies. "He kept saying we'd see Mummy soon," Emma said, "but we never did. He kept me in the motel room all night. He wouldn't let me use the phone. He said if I tried to leave or tell anyone, something bad would happen to Mummy." This morning, Robert had taken Emma to Orlando International Airport. He'd given her explicit instructions. "He told me to call him Dad if anyone asked. He said if I didn't call him Dad, bad people would hurt Mummy. He said I had to pretend he was my father or Mummy would die. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do." At the airport and on the plane, Emma had been terrified, but tried to comply with Robert's instructions because she believed her mother's life depended on it. But when Jessica, the flight attendant, had been kind to her, when Jessica had noticed something was wrong, Emma had found a moment of courage to whisper the truth. "That's not my dad." "You were so brave to tell the flight attendant the truth," Dr. Park said, hugging Emma gently. "You saved yourself, honey. By telling her, you made it possible for us to save you. You're a hero." While Emma was being interviewed and cared for, FBI agents in Orlando were racing to Emma's home to check on Amy Wilson and ensure she was safe. Orlando FBI agents and local police arrived at 28047 Magnolia Street, the Wilson family home, within an hour of Robert Mitchell's detention in Seattle. They knocked urgently on the door. Amy Wilson answered, looking exhausted and panicked. "My daughter Emma is missing. She disappeared yesterday from our front yard. I called 911 immediately, but no one's found her yet. Please tell me you have news about Emma." Agent Maria Santos showed her badge. "Miss Wilson, we have good news. Emma is safe. She's in Seattle with FBI agents. She's physically unharmed." Amy collapsed in relief, sobbing, "Oh, thank God. Thank God. Where has she been? What happened? How did she end up in Seattle?" "She was abducted yesterday afternoon by a man named Robert Mitchell. He lured her into his car by claiming you were sick and needed her. He kept her overnight at a motel, then took her to the airport this morning and attempted to transport her out of state on a flight to Seattle. But a flight attendant noticed Emma's distress. Emma told her the man wasn't her father, and agents detained Mitchell when the flight landed." "Who is Robert Mitchell? I don't know anyone by that name." "We're investigating his background and motives. What we know so far is that he specifically targeted Emma. This wasn't random. He knew where you lived, knew Emma's routine of playing in the front yard. He planned this abduction.
Amy looked horrified. But why? Why would someone target my daughter? That was the critical question. Who was Robert Mitchell, and why had he abducted 7-year-old Emma Wilson? In Seattle, FBI agent David Foster interrogated Robert Mitchell, who'd been arrested for kidnapping, child abduction, and interstate transportation of a minor for illegal purposes. Initially, Robert refused to speak without an attorney, but while waiting for his public defender to arrive, Agent Foster ran Robert Mitchell's name and information through databases. What came back was chilling. Robert Mitchell, age 52, had a criminal history. 1998, arrested for solicitation of a minor, charges dropped due to technicality. 2003, investigated for suspicious contact with children at a park, no charges filed. Pectorite, a tweet on left altern around in a park. Pectorite, and he just attempted to abduct a 7-year-old girl and transport her out of state. This was likely a planned abduction with intent to sexually exploit the child. Agent Foster told his team, Mitchell specifically targeted Emma Wilson. He knew where she lived, knew her routine, and had a plan to take her out of state where he'd have control over her. When Robert's attorney arrived and interrogation resumed, Robert maintained that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. I was trying to help Emma, Robert claimed. I saw her crying in her front yard, saying her mother was sick. I offered to help her find her mother. She got in my car voluntarily. Then I realized the situation was complicated, so I decided to take her to my family in Seattle, where she'd be safe. The story made no sense, and contradicted Emma's account entirely. Agent Foster confronted Robert with the facts. Emma says you approached her, told her you were a friend of her mother's, and said her mother was in the hospital and needed her immediately. You lured her into your car with lies. You kept her at a motel overnight. You instructed her to call you Dad, and told her if she didn't comply, her mother would be harmed. You attempted to transport her out of state. And you're a registered sex offender who failed to register when you moved to Florida, making you a fugitive. I want to invoke my right to remain silent, Robert said, his confident facade completely gone. That's your right, Foster said. But let me tell you what we know. You're a predator. You targeted a vulnerable child, a 7-year-old girl whose father died, being raised by a single mother. You planned this abduction. You knew where she lived. You had a story ready to lure her. You had a motel room prepared. You had plane tickets to transport her out of state. This was premeditated child abduction, with likely intent to sexually exploit her. We're investigating how you identified Emma as a target. We're searching your home, your computer, your phone. We're going to find out how deep this goes. If you've abducted other children, if you're part of a larger network, if you've already harmed children, everything you've done is going to be exposed. Robert remained silent, but his expression showed fear. He knew how bad this was for him. FBI investigation of Robert Mitchell revealed disturbing patterns, suggesting Emma wasn't his first victim or intended victim. Computer evidence. Agents seized Robert's laptop and phone, finding hundreds of images of children, not pornographic but concerning photos, apparently taken surreptitiously, of children at parks, schools, public places. Internet search history, including how to approach children, gaining a child's trust, traveling with children, without suspicion, maps and notes about several Orlando neighborhoods, including Emma's Street, or information about single-parent families in the area. Research on states with less stringent sex offender monitoring. Mitchell was hunting for victims, explained FBI cybercrimes expert Jennifer Park. He researched single-parent families, identified vulnerable children, and planned abductions. Emma was likely not his first attempt. He'd been building toward this pattern of behavior. Investigation revealed Robert had moved frequently over the past decade. He'd search Daisy 15, Arizona to Florida, failed to register as sex offender. Daisy flust 1 tune of tomates, Peter named a park. Daisy Flores, and a toast to trade the park, Woo Falls Palmerton 16. Daisy flust 1 tune of Taskland, Daisy flust 1 of Starring, Dory, he played at Tistles to Toys, Daisy flust 1 tuna, Tampa 1 of 19. 7-year-old boy missing for 3 days, then found wandering, claimed an Iceman had taken him but couldn't describe details. Orlando 1 of 19. 8-year-old girl reported suspicious man following her near school. We're investigating whether Mitchell was involved in these incidents, said Agent Foster. The pattern is concerning. He moves to an area, there are incidents involving children, then he moves again. Emma may have been his latest attempt, but likely not his first. How he identified Emma. Investigation showed Mitchell had been deliberately targeting Emma's family. Wanted Doris for several weeks. He'd researched Amy Wilson online, learning she was a single mother. Her husband's obituary was online. He'd established Emma's routine of playing outside in the late afternoon while Amy prepared dinner. He'd planned his approach for maximum likelihood of success. Mitchell was a calculating predator, Foster explained. He identified a vulnerable target, a young girl from a single-parent household. He observed her routine. He developed a plan to lure her that would work quickly before the mother noticed. He had transportation ready, a place to keep her overnight, and plane tickets to get her out of state. This was sophisticated, planned predation.
While FBI investigated Robert Mitchell, arrangements were made to reunite Emma with her mother. Amy Wilson flew to Seattle that evening, accompanied by FBI victim advocates. The reunion at the FBI field office was emotional and cathartic. Amy ran to Emma, scooping her into her arms, both crying. "Baby, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You're safe now. You're safe," Amy sobbed, holding Emma tightly. "Mommy, I thought you were in the hospital." "The man said you were sick and I had to come with him. I was so scared. I wanted to come home but he wouldn't let me." Emma cried into her mother's shoulder. "I know, baby, I know, but it's over now. That bad man can't hurt you anymore. You're safe. You're with Mommy now." They held each other for long minutes while victim advocates and agents gave them space to process the trauma and relief. Eventually, Amy was briefed on what had happened, how Robert had lured Emma, kept her overnight, attempted to transport her out of state, and how flight attendant Jessica Martinez had noticed Emma's distress and reported it. "I want to thank her," Amy said. "The flight attendant who noticed something was wrong and saved my daughter. Can I meet her?" Arrangements were made for Amy and Emma to meet Jessica Martinez, who'd stayed late at the airport to learn the outcome of the situation she'd reported. When Jessica saw Emma safe with her mother, she started crying. "Emma, oh sweetie, I'm so glad you're okay." Emma ran to Jessica and hugged her. "Thank you for helping me. You were so nice to me on the airplane. When you gave me cookies and held my hand, I felt like maybe you would help me, so I told you the truth, and you did help. You saved me. You saved yourself, honey," Jessica said, kneeling to Emma's level. "You were so brave to tell me the truth, even though you were scared. I just made sure the right people knew you needed help. You're the brave one." Amy hugged Jessica, crying. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for caring. Thank you for reporting your concerns. If you hadn't, that monster would have taken my daughter away, and I might never have seen her again. You saved my child's life." "I was just doing my job," Jessica said, emotional. "Flight attendants are trained to recognize concerning situations, but honestly, it was Emma who caught my attention. Something about her seemed wrong. She looked scared. She wasn't interacting naturally with the man, and when I called him her dad, she reacted with confusion. I trusted my instincts that something was wrong, and I'm so grateful I did." The meeting was brief, but meaningful for everyone involved. Emma had been saved because one flight attendant had paid attention, trusted her instincts, and acted on her concerns. Jessica Martinez found herself processing an experience that had shaken her more than she'd anticipated. She'd dealt with difficult passengers before, medical emergencies, unruly behavior, occasional security concerns. But this was different. This was a child predator attempting to abduct a little girl, and Jessica had been the one to recognize it and intervene. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed," Jessica told her husband Carlos that night. "If I'd been less observant, if I'd accepted the man's explanations that Emma was just shy or tired, if I hadn't trusted my gut that something was wrong, he would have gotten away with her. She'd have arrived in Seattle and disappeared, and her mother might never have found her. But you did notice," Carlos said, holding her. "You paid attention. You recognized something was wrong. You reported it. Because of you, Emma is safe with her mother right now. That little girl is home because you trusted your instincts." Jessica thought about all the small moments that had added up to saving Emma, noticing the girl's frightened body language during boarding, observing the lack of natural interaction between her and the man, seeing Emma's reaction when Jessica called him her dad, spotting the bruises on Emma's wrist, and most importantly, hearing Emma's whispered words, "That's not my dad." Any one of those things alone might not have been enough to act on, Jessica reflected. But together, they painted a clear picture that something was very wrong. Flight attendants see thousands of passengers. Most interactions are routine. But sometimes, you see something that doesn't fit the pattern, and you have to trust that instinct and investigate. Jessica had worked for Delta for 11 years and had received training on recognizing human trafficking and child abduction situations. Airlines had become increasingly vigilant about these issues, training crew members to spot warning signs. Red flags Jessica had recognized, physical indicators, child appearing frightened, subdued, or unable to make eye contact. Behavioral indicators, adult answering all questions for child, preventing child from speaking independently, inconsistent stories, adults' explanations not matching observed behavior, physical evidence, bruises or marks suggesting physical control or harm, child's disclosure, Emma whispering, "That's not my dad." The training prepared me to recognize these signs, Jessica said, but knowing what to look for and actually seeing it in person are different experiences. When Emma whispered, "That's not my dad," my blood ran cold. I knew immediately this was serious. Jessica spoke with Delta management the next day about the incident. The airline was fully supportive of her actions and proud that their training had resulted in saving a child. "You did exactly what you were trained to do," said Jessica's supervisor, Regional Manager Patricia Morrison. "You observed concerning behavior, you trusted your instincts, you reported to the captain, and you helped coordinate with law enforcement. Your professionalism and awareness saved a child's life. Delta is proud of you." The airline asked Jessica if she'd be willing to share her experience in training materials for other flight attendants. She agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to help other crew members recognize and respond to similar situations. Robert Mitchell faced federal charges that would likely result in life imprisonment. Primary charges: kidnapping, federal offense due to interstate transportation; child abduction, interstate transportation of a minor for illegal purposes; failure to register as sex offender; being a fugitive from justice; additional investigation. FBI was building cases connecting Mitchell to other unsolved child disappearances in areas where he'd lived. The evidence was circumstantial but mounting. Romanding, Jacksonville, 2016. 6-year-old Sophia Martinez disappeared from a playground. She'd last been seen talking to a nice man who offered to help her find her lost dog. Security footage showed a man matching Mitchell's description in the area. Sophia was never found. Tampa, 2019. 7-year-old Marcus Thompson was missing for 3 days before being found wandering near a highway rest stop. Marcus said a friend had taken him for an adventure, but wouldn't provide details. He showed signs of trauma, but couldn't or wouldn't describe what happened. The case remained unsolved. Evidence from Mitchell's computer suggested he'd been researching both cases, not unusual for someone with general interest in crimes, but combined with his presence in those cities at those times and his pattern of predatory behavior, it was suspicious. "We're building cases on the Jacksonville and Tampa incidents," prosecutor Jennifer Martinez told the FBI team. "But the Orlando case, Emma Wilson's abduction, is rock solid. We have Emma's testimony, Jessica Martinez's observations, the captain and crew's statements, Mitchell's failed sex offender registration, his computer evidence showing planning and targeting, and his own inconsistent statements. He's going to prison for a very long time." Mitchell's defense attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor refused any deal that didn't include life imprisonment. "Your client is a child predator who's likely been operating for years," Martinez told the defense attorney. "He targeted a vulnerable 7-year-old girl, lured her with lies, held her captive, and attempted to transport her out of state for purposes we can only imagine would have resulted in severe harm or death. Emma Wilson is alive and safe only because a flight attendant noticed something was wrong and reported it. If that hadn't happened, we'd likely be investigating a murder. Your client deserves maximum punishment, and that's what we're seeking." The case went to trial 6 months later. The evidence was overwhelming, and the trial was relatively brief. Key testimony: Emma Wilson, now age 8, testified via closed-circuit television to avoid having to face Mitchell in person. She described how Mitchell had approached her, lied about her mother being sick, lured her into his car, kept her at a motel, and forced her to pretend he was her father on the airplane. "He told me if I didn't call him Dad, bad people would hurt my mummy," Emma testified, her voice small but clear. "I was so scared, but the nice flight attendant, Miss Jessica, she was so kind to me. She gave me cookies and held my hand. When she called the man my dad, I didn't want to lie anymore, so I whispered the truth. I told her that's not my dad, and she helped me. She saved me." Jessica Martinez testified about her observations during Flight 28047. Emma appeared frightened and subdued. Her body language was stiff and uncomfortable. When I called the defendant her father, Emma reacted with confusion or fear. The defendant was controlling, answering for Emma, preventing her from speaking, maintaining constant physical contact. Emma had bruises on her wrist that looked like finger marks, and when Emma grabbed my hand, she whispered, "That's not my dad." Everything about the situation indicated a child in distress with an adult who wasn't her parent. Amy Wilson testified about the terror of her daughter's disappearance and the relief of her rescue. "Emma was playing in our front yard Tuesday afternoon. I was checking on her through the kitchen window every few minutes while I made dinner. 1 minute she was there, the next she was gone. I ran outside screaming her name. She'd vanished. I called 911 immediately. The police searched but found nothing. For 24 hours I didn't know if my daughter was alive or dead." Then I got the call from FBI saying Emma was safe in Seattle, that she'd been abducted, but a flight attendant had noticed and reported it. I flew to Seattle immediately. Seeing Emma alive and safe was the greatest moment of my life, but knowing what could have happened, what that monster was planning to do to my baby, haunts me. FBI expert testimony covered Mitchell's criminal history, his failure to register as a sex offender, the evidence from his computer showing targeting of children, and the pattern suggesting he'd been involved in other child disappearances. Mitchell's defense attorney tried to suggest the abduction was a misunderstanding, that Mitchell had genuinely been trying to help a crying child, and things spiraled from there. But the evidence demolished that defense. Mitchell's computer showed weeks of research on Emma's family and planning. He'd purchased plane tickets before approaching Emma. He'd booked a motel room in advance. He'd given Emma explicit instructions to call him Dad and threatened consequences if she didn't comply. His history as a registered sex offender who'd failed to register showed a pattern of predatory behavior. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all federal charges. Mitchell showed no emotion as verdicts were read. Even facing life imprisonment, he maintained an attitude of detached indifference, as if what he'd done wasn't particularly serious. At sentencing, Amy Wilson provided a victim impact statement. Robert Mitchell tried to steal my daughter. He lured my 7-year-old child with lies, held her captive, and attempted to transport her out of state for purposes that terrify me to imagine. Emma is alive and home only because flight attendant Jessica Martinez noticed something was wrong and reported it. If Jessica hadn't paid attention, if Emma hadn't found courage to whisper the truth, my daughter would be gone. Mitchell showed no remorse. He planned this abduction. He targeted my vulnerable child. He would have done terrible things to her, and he's likely done this to other children. Children who weren't as lucky as Emma. Children whose families are still searching for them. Mitchell deserves life in prison, not just as punishment, but to ensure he can never hurt another child. He's a predator who will reoffend if given any opportunity. Society must be protected from him. Emma also provided a brief statement, written and read by the victim advocate since Emma was too young and traumatized to appear in person. The bad man took me from my mummy. He lied and said mummy was sick. He kept me in a scary room. He said bad things would happen if I didn't pretend he was my daddy. I was so scared. But Miss Jessica on the airplane was nice to me. She gave me cookies. She held my hand. I told her the truth, that he wasn't my dad. She helped me. Now I'm safe with my mummy. But I still have nightmares. I'm still scared sometimes. The bad man hurt me, even though he didn't hit me. I want him to go to jail forever, so he can't take other kids from their mummies. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Robert Mitchell to life imprisonment without possibility of parole on the kidnapping charge, plus additional consecutive sentences on other charges. Mr. Mitchell, you are a predator who targeted a vulnerable child for abduction and likely sexual exploitation, Judge Morrison said. You planned this crime carefully, identifying a 7-year-old girl from a single-parent household, observing her routine, and executing a plan to lure and abduct her. You held her captive overnight and attempted to transport her out of state. Emma Wilson survived only because she found courage to tell a flight attendant the truth, and that flight attendant trusted her instincts and reported it. You've shown no remorse. Your history suggests you victimized other children. You are a danger to children and to society. You deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison, and that's the sentence I'm imposing. Life without parole, plus 240 years on additional counts. You will die in prison, as you should. Mitchell was led from the courtroom in shackles, convicted and sentenced to die in federal prison. Emma Wilson's case became a catalyst for enhanced training and protocols across the airline industry regarding child safety and recognizing potential abduction situations. Enhanced flight attendant training. Airlines implemented comprehensive training programs teaching crew members to recognize child trafficking and abduction indicators, behavioral red flags. Child appears frightened, submissive, or unable to make eye contact. Child doesn't respond to own name or seems confused about basic information. Adult prevents child from speaking independently. No natural interaction or affection between adult and child. Physical contact seems controlling rather than parental. Physical indicators, ruses, marks or signs of physical restraint. Child appears malnourished or poorly cared for. Clothing inappropriate for weather or situation. Child lacks luggage or personal belongings. Documentation issues. Adult can't provide basic information about child. Adult has no documentation of relationship to child. Story about travel purpose doesn't make sense. Adult becomes defensive when questioned. What flight attendants should do. Trust instincts if something feels wrong. Observe interaction patterns throughout flight. Create opportunities to speak with child separately if possible. Document observations. Report concerns to captain immediately. Captain alerts law enforcement at destination. Jessica Martinez saved Emma Wilson by recognizing red flags and trusting her instincts, explained airline safety trainer Robert Chen. We're teaching all flight attendants to be as observant and willing to act on concerns. Flight attendants are on the front lines of identifying trafficking and abduction situations because they interact directly with passengers in an enclosed environment for hours. Coordination with law enforcement. Airlines developed protocols for coordinating with FBI and local law enforcement when child safety concerns arose. Dedicated hotlines for reporting concerns in flight. Training for handling situations without alerting suspected abductors. Systems for documenting evidence and observations. Public awareness. Airlines began including information about recognizing and reporting trafficking in their in-flight magazines and video content. Educational content about what trafficking looks like. Information about how to report concerns. Stories of successful interventions like Emma's rescue. See something, say something for child safety. Building on existing security awareness campaigns, airlines emphasized that passengers should also report concerns about children who seem to be in distress or danger. If you see a child who appears frightened or controlled, if an adult and child's relationship seems suspicious, if you overhear concerning conversations, if a child tries to communicate distress, report concerns to flight attendants or through airline hotlines. Emma Wilson's journey from rescued child to healing survivor was long and complex. At age 7, she'd experienced a traumatic abduction that would affect her for years to come. Immediate aftermath. In the days following her rescue, Emma struggled with nightmares, anxiety, and fear that the bad man would return. She was clingy with her mother, afraid to be out of Amy's sight. She refused to go outside and play in the yard where Mitchell had approached her. Emma regressed in some ways, explained her therapist, Dr. Maria Santos, who specialized in childhood trauma. She started having accidents at night again. She wanted to sleep in her mother's bed. She was afraid of strangers, especially men. These are all normal trauma responses for a child who's experienced abduction. Therapy. Emma began intensive trauma-focused therapy using child-appropriate techniques. Art therapy, to express feelings she couldn't put into words. Cognitive behavioral therapy adapted for children. MDR. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, to process traumatic memories. Children process trauma differently than adults, Dr. Santos explained. Emma couldn't sit and talk through her feelings like an adult might. She needed child-friendly ways to process what happened, through play, art, storytelling. Gradually, through therapy, she was able to make sense of the experience and begin healing. Emma also needed help understanding that what happened wasn't her fault, a common concern for child victims who blame themselves. Emma felt guilty that she'd gotten in the car with Mitchell, Dr. Santos said. She thought she'd done something wrong, that she should have known better. We worked on helping her understand that she was tricked by an adult who deliberately lied to her. The responsibility belongs entirely to Mitchell, not to Emma. Family support. Amy Wilson struggled with her own trauma, the terror of Emma's disappearance, guilt about not protecting her daughter, and fear about Emma's long-term well-being. I blamed myself, Amy admitted during family therapy sessions. Emma was playing in our yard, a place that should have been safe. I was inside making dinner, checking on her regularly. But in the few minutes between checks, a predator approached her and took her. I felt like I'd failed to protect my child. You didn't fail, Dr. Santos assured Amy. You were being a normal parent, letting your child play outside while you prepared dinner. Mitchell was a calculating predator who'd observed your family and identified a brief window of opportunity. No parent can watch their children every single second. What happened was Mitchell's fault, not yours. Amy also attended therapy to process her own trauma and to learn how best to support Emma's recovery. School and social reintegration. Returning to school and normal routines was challenging for Emma. She'd missed a week of school due to the abduction and rescue, and when she returned, other children asked questions she didn't know how to answer. "Where were you?" classmates would ask. "We heard you got kidnapped." Emma's teacher and school counselor worked with Amy to create a plan for Emma's return. Teachers were briefed on Emma's experience, without graphic details. Classmates were told Emma had been through something scary and needed kindness and normalcy. School counselor checked in with Emma daily. Emma had a safe person she could go to if overwhelmed. Accommodations were made for Emma's needs. She could call her mum anytime, step out of class if anxious, etc. Gradually, Emma began rebuilding her confidence and sense of safety. The nightmares decreased. She started playing outside again. With Amy always present, she reconnected with friends. She laughed again. Recovery isn't linear, Dr. Santos explained. Emma has good days and hard days. Sometimes something triggers memories, and she struggles. But overall, she's healing. She's resilient. She has strong support, and she's receiving good therapy.
She'll carry this experience with her always, but it doesn't have to define her entire life. Relationship with Jessica. Emma maintained a relationship with Jessica Martinez, who visited the Wilson family several times and kept in touch through cards and video calls. Miss Jessica is my hero, Emma told her mother. She saved me because she paid attention. When I was so scared on the airplane, she was kind to me. When I told her the truth, she believed me. I want to be like her when I grow up, someone who helps people who are scared. 5 years after Jessica Martinez heard Emma Wilson whisper, "That's not my dad," on Flight 2847, both reflected on how one moment of observation and courage had changed their lives. Emma, now 12, was thriving in middle school. She'd completed years of therapy and had processed much of her trauma, though she acknowledged it would always be part of her story. 5 years ago, a bad man took me from my mummy, Emma told a youth group focused on personal safety education. He lied and said mummy was sick. He kept me at a scary place overnight. He took me on an aeroplane and told me to pretend he was my daddy. I was so scared. But a flight attendant, Miss Jessica, noticed something was wrong. She was kind to me. She gave me cookies. When I whispered that the man wasn't my dad, she believed me. She called the police. She saved me. Emma described the 5 years since the therapy, the healing, returning to normal kid activities, and finding purpose in educating other children about stranger danger and how to seek help if they're ever in danger. I want kids to know that if something bad happens, there are good people who will help you, Emma said. Miss Jessica helped me. Police helped me. My mum protected me. If you're ever scared or in danger, tell a trusted adult. Keep telling until someone helps you. Don't give up. Emma had become a junior advocate for child safety, speaking at schools and community events about her experience and how children can stay safe. "I'm not ashamed of what happened to me," Emma said. "It wasn't my fault. A bad person did a bad thing, but I survived, and now I want to help other kids stay safe and know they can get help if they need it." Jessica Martinez, now 43, had been promoted to lead flight attendant and training coordinator for Delta. She developed and implemented training programs, teaching crew members to recognize human trafficking and child abduction situations. 5 years ago, I noticed a scared little girl on my flight who didn't seem right with the man claiming to be her father, Jessica told a conference of airline safety professionals. I trusted my instincts that something was wrong. I observed their interactions. When Emma whispered, "That's not my dad," I reported it immediately to the captain. That decision saved her life. Jessica described how the experience had changed her perspective on her role as a flight attendant. "I used to think my job was about safety demonstrations, serving drinks, and helping passengers stow luggage. But Emma's case taught me that flight attendants are often the first and only people who might notice when someone is in danger. We interact with passengers closely for hours. We're positioned to observe behavior and recognize when something's wrong. We have a responsibility to pay attention and act when we see concerning situations." Jessica's training program had reached over 100,000 flight attendants across multiple airlines and had led to 78 documented cases where crew members identified trafficking or abduction situations and helped rescue victims. "Not every concerning situation we investigate turns out to be trafficking or abduction," Jessica explained. "Sometimes there are innocent explanations for behavior that seem suspicious, but it's always worth investigating. Better to check and be wrong than to ignore concerns and allow someone to be harmed." Jessica remained close with Emma and the Wilson family, visiting regularly and maintaining a meaningful friendship that had started from one desperate moment on an airplane. "Emma calls me her guardian angel," Jessica said, emotional. "But she's the brave one. She found courage to tell me the truth, even though she was terrified. She trusted that I would help. That trust saved her life as much as my observation did." Robert Mitchell remained in federal prison serving his life sentence. He'd made unsuccessful appeals and would spend the rest of his life incarcerated. FBI investigation had connected him to 2 other child disappearances, though formal charges were never filed due to insufficient evidence for conviction beyond Emma's case. Amy Wilson, now 37, had rebuilt her life and found peace after years of processing the trauma of Emma's abduction and rescue. 5 years ago, my daughter was taken from our front yard, Amy reflected. For 24 hours, I didn't know if she was alive or dead. Then I got the call that Emma was safe in Seattle, that a flight attendant had noticed something wrong and reported it. Flying to Seattle to get Emma was the longest and best flight of my life. Holding my daughter again after fearing I'd lost her forever. There are no words for that feeling. Amy had become an advocate for parental vigilance and community awareness about child predators. "We want our children to have normal childhoods, playing outside, exploring, being independent," Amy told parent groups. "But there are predators who target vulnerable children. Emma was playing in our front yard, a place that should have been safe. But a predator had observed our family and identified an opportunity. We can't watch our children every second, but we can teach them safety skills, stay aware of who's in our neighborhoods, and create communities where everyone watches out for children." A decade after Flight 2847 landed in Seattle, with a frightened 7-year-old girl and the man who'd abducted her, The story remained a powerful example of awareness, instinct and courage. Jessica Martinez, now 48 and Director of Safety Training for Delta Airlines, had expanded her child safety training program to become industry standard across U.S. airlines. 10 years ago, I was a flight attendant working a routine Orlando to Seattle flight, Jessica told an audience at an airline industry conference. A little girl whispered to me, "That's not my dad," about the man she was traveling with. That whisper, that moment of courage from a terrified child, started a rescue operation that saved her from a predator who'd abducted her. It changed my life and my career. It changed how airlines train crew members to recognize trafficking and abduction. And most importantly, it saved Emma Wilson's life. Jessica's training program had reached over 250,000 airline employees and had resulted in over 150 documented rescues of trafficking victims and abducted children over a decade. Each of those 150 cases represents a life saved because someone paid attention, trusted their instincts, and reported concerns, Jessica said. That's the legacy of Emma's rescue, not just her individual rescue, but a decade of heightened awareness that's protected hundreds of vulnerable people. Emma Wilson, now 17, and a high school senior, had become a prominent youth advocate for child safety and survivor support.
10 years ago, when I was 7, I was abducted by a stranger who lured me with lies about my mother being sick, Emma told a youth conference. He held me overnight, then took me on an airplane, threatening me to pretend he was my father. I was terrified, but a flight attendant, Jessica Martinez, noticed something was wrong. She recognized I was in distress. When I found courage to whisper the truth, she believed me and acted immediately. She saved my life. Emma described the decade of recovery, therapy, rebuilding trust and safety, and eventually finding purpose in helping other young people understand safety and resilience. That experience will always be part of my story, Emma said. But it doesn't define me. I'm not just the girl who was kidnapped. I'm a student, an athlete, a friend, a daughter, a survivor, an advocate. What happened to me was terrible, but I survived. I healed. I'm building a good life. And I use my experience to help other kids stay safe and help other survivors know that recovery is possible. Emma was headed to college in the fall with plans to study social work and criminal justice, hoping to work with child victims of crimes. I want to help kids like 7-year-old me, scared, traumatized, needing someone who understands what they've been through, Emma explained. Miss Jessica helped me when I was that scared 7-year-old. Now I want to help others. At an event commemorating the 10th anniversary of Emma's rescue, Emma and Jessica stood together reflecting on a decade since one whispered sentence had changed both their lives. When you whispered, "That's not my dad," I knew immediately something was seriously wrong, Jessica said to Emma. That moment of courage, telling the truth even though you were terrified, that saved your life. You were so brave. You gave me permission to tell the truth, Emma countered. You were kind to me. You noticed I was scared. You created a moment where I felt safe enough to whisper the truth, and when I did, you believed me. You didn't dismiss it or make excuses. You acted immediately. That's what saved me. Your awareness and your willingness to act. They stood together looking at a photo from 10 years ago, Emma as a tiny, frightened 7-year-old being reunited with her mother, and Jessica in her flight attendant uniform at the airport after the rescue. Look how much has changed, Emma said. That scared little girl has grown into someone strong, someone who uses her experience to help others, someone who isn't defined by what happened to her, but by how she responded to it. And I went from a flight attendant who happened to notice something wrong to someone who trains thousands of airline employees to recognize and respond to trafficking situations, Jessica added. One moment of paying attention created ripples that have protected so many people over a decade. 10 years, one routine flight, one scared 7-year-old girl, one flight attendant who paid attention, one whispered sentence, "That's not my dad." One child rescued that day, one predator imprisoned for life, hundreds more victims identified and helped through enhanced awareness, an entire industry transformed in how it recognizes and responds to child endangerment. 2 lives, a survivor and her rescuer, forever connected by courage. One moment of observation, one moment of courage, one whispered truth that changed everything. That was always enough, more than enough, everything.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.